Thank you. And thank you. Isn't it great to be here for late nights at the DMA? It's wonderful. So thank you for joining us for this and certainly all of the other programs. I have to say, this is my third opportunity to host one of these conversations for this season, and it's just great. Not only the wonderful talent that it's been able to attract to bring to Dallas, but also the fact that I always walk out and I see a room full of people who love reading and writing as much as I do, and that great community that we share where we're able to talk to authors and talk about their works and enjoy that. I've always said that the Dallas Museum of Art is a special place for me since I grew up here. I took my first field trip to a museum here when I was a student at Williams High School, so to have the chance to come back and to participate in a program like this is very, very special. And it's also special to have somebody like Ben Mezrich here tonight. I was talking to one of my writer friends today and told him what I was doing this evening, and he's like, oh, that Ben, he's the one that gets all the great stories that I would love to write. And I think that that's true. He is now the author of 12 books, though he says no one read his first 6, which I don't believe. But you know him, I'm sure, for the book Bringing Down the House, which was made into a movie with Kevin Spacey called 21. I'm sure that you know him from a book called The Accidental Billionaires, which was made into a little movie called The Social Network. And now I know that we'll all be talking about this book called Sex on the Moon, which is fantastic in so many ways, but not the least of which is that it's centered here in Texas. And so many of the places that are featured in the book, from the Johnson Space Center to Enchanted Rock to a night out on the coast in Galveston, I think will be so familiar to many of you. So please welcome to Dallas and welcome to the stage, Ben Mezrich. So, am I wrong that when I heard that the title of the book was Sex on the Moon, I thought that that was a drink that the college kids have at South Padre?
It does sound like a drink,
break,
right?
so.
You know, my wife actually came up with the title, so I was not the dirty mind behind the title, but the main character actually did spread moon rocks on a bed and had sex with his girlfriend on the moon, and so that's, you know, I'm afraid it's getting caught in spam filters.
Right, whenever the emails go out.
I know, but yeah.
All right, well, as I was reading it, I kept thinking, you know, sort of processing the title and where did it come from? And as you say, you get to a moment later in the book where it becomes very evident as to why the book is called that. Very quick, because I'm guessing that many people have not had the chance to read it. So this is one of those delicate things where you don't want to give away what happens, but also you want to talk about
I tend to give
plot.
away too much. So
Go ahead. Let's just say, tell us about Thad and what he is and what he does. You said that he is the most complex individual that you have written about in any of your books. Take that, Mark Zuckerberg. So tell us a little bit about him and what mainly attracted you to tell his story.
Well, I mean, Thad Roberts basically came from a very hard background, a very fundamentalist Mormon family. He was kicked out of his house when he was 18 for admitting to premarital sex. And then he decided he wanted to be an astronaut, and he changed his whole life and kind of became James Bond, and he majored in geology and physics and astronomy at University of Utah, and he learned how to fly airplanes and scuba dive and spoke, you know, what I said, five languages. And then he got into NASA's Johnson Space Center. It's a co-op program, so it's for college kids, but it's really a feeder to the astronaut training program. So he was achieving his dream. He was a standout there. He was a big star. He became the social leader of, you know, all the co-ops and the interns. And then he fell in love with a young intern. And, you know, we've all done something stupid out of love. Well, what Thad Roberts did is he stole a 600-pound safe full of moon rocks from his professor's office. And, as I said, spread them on a bed, had sex with his girlfriend, and then tried to sell them over the internet to a Belgian gem dealer,
whose name is?
His name was Axel Emmerman, and you couldn't have invented this guy. This guy, he's never been out of Antwerp in his life. He's collects rocks and trades them every Monday night in this, you know, huge center where all the guys in Antwerp trade rocks. His hobby is popinjay, which I had never heard of, which is a sport where there's a wooden bird on a 100-foot pole, and all these men stand around it and shoot at it with crossbows. And this is a real sport I had never heard of. So he's this guy, and he sees this ad on the internet, I've got moon rocks for sale, and he is this big believer in right and wrong, so he immediately called the FBI. He emailed the FBI in Tampa, and it became this big sting operation. and Thad Roberts was taken down. I don't want to. I mean, I always give it away, but you know he got arrested.
We'll stop
I mean,
right there.
right.
Don't cross that
Right.
line. You obviously have come off of enormous success with not only the books, but also the fact that they then are converted to movies, which obviously helps in terms of that notoriety.
Although they always change the titles of my movies, and it's really annoying. So Sex on the Moon, I feel like, is the first one that they have to keep.
You're locked in on
right?
it. You're locked in on that one. And certainly you had said that you were working on this at the time that the Social Network was being filmed, so there was some kind of overlap. But at that point, I've always thought that in the way that actors and actresses are only as good as the roles that they choose, writers are only as good as the stories that they pick. Right. So what was it, I mean, all of that you just explained notwithstanding, of all of the stories that you could have told, what was it that attracted you to this particular topic?
I mean, you know what? For me, the stories come to me. I don't look for them anymore. Ever since Bringing Down the House, I get 20 or 30 emails or phone calls a week.
Gotcha.
Just every college kid who does something crazy will call me. And, you know, I'd always wanted to write about NASA. I think it's amazing. But when you think of NASA, you think of the 60s. You know, you think of Tom Hanks in a little silver capsule.
Right.
And this let me get inside NASA today. So Thad Roberts, you know, out of the blue contacted me. He had just gotten out of prison. He was on probation, and it was weird because I'd never met someone who had spent almost a decade in prison before, so I arranged to meet him in a crowded hotel lobby. You know. But he was the nicest, you know, most charismatic, good-looking, like, smart guy who did something stupid.
The nicest felon you had ever met.
He really was, and I was, you know, amazed. No one had written about the story.
Right.
There had been one article in the LA Times, maybe in Texas there had been more stuff, but I had not seen anything about this, and I just couldn't believe it. And so the first thing I did was I filed a Freedom of Information Act with the FBI to get the FBI file, which is thousands of pages. I mean, I even got, when the FBI agents took him down, they were wearing wires, and I got the transcripts of everything that was said on the wires, and the first thing Thad says when he walks into the restaurant is if you're wearing a wire, I'm screwed. So that's on tape. So, yeah, so it was wild. It was about a year-long interviewing everybody I could.
I see. And so there's one section in the book which I think is just great, too, where there's that correspondence between Thad, who's going by the name Orb Robinson.
Right, it's like a play on Roy Orbison.
Right.
Because Roy Orbison was a geologist, it turns out.
Which is great, which I didn't know.
Yeah.
But you're actually reprinting their emails. And so those are, in fact,
those are the real. Axel Emmerman sent me those, actually.
Right.
Emmerman was very excited that I was writing this book. He actually, NASA gave him as a gift for solving the moon rock caper. They named an asteroid after him. So there's an Emmerman asteroid floating around the sun somewhere. But yeah, everything in the book is you know, reprinted directly, and a lot of the dialogue is actually you know, straight from the transcripts and everything. So you know, I do get attacked a lot in the press for my style, which is a very kind of dramatic, cinematic way of telling a nonfiction story. But the reality is that everything, you know, in here is from the files.
Right. Well, you brought that up, and so that's something I wanted to visit with you about a little bit. Certainly, that came out a lot in Bringing Down the House. And so I wonder if you could talk about that technique that you employ as a writer.
My controversial technique.
Your controversial technique. Nothing sells books like controversy.
Exactly.
But how you employ that and why. And I have to say, you know, in the New York Times review that just came out yesterday.
Yeah, she hates me.
She hated you, okay, he said it, right? But I mean, I think that's part of it. That was sort of the hangover from that. And so tell me as an editor why you do it that way.
It's been like this in my entire career. So I'm a very cinematic thinker, and this is the kind of stuff I like to read. And it's a form of new journalism, I guess, but I get all of the information. I interview just about everybody. Get thousands of pages of court documents, all the FBI stuff, and then I sit down and I tell the story in a very visual way. And there are going to be journalists who do not like it. Certainly Janet Maslin is one of those.
Janet was not.
But you know, I don't necessarily write for Janet Maslin. I write for me and the people who like this kind of book. And the reality is it's a true story, and it's as true as any other thing on the nonfiction list. I mean, you know, you see a biography of Cleopatra, right? I mean, come on, nobody knows anything about Cleopatra. And you see a biography of Abraham Lincoln, and you see, Obama's biography has invented characters. I mean, it's a process. You know, you have to take the facts and then write it in a certain way. I choose to write it in a very cinematic way. So, for instance, I'll interview Thad Roberts. I'll interview the other kid who was there, this guy Gordon, who's later in the book. I'll interview Axel Emmerman. So I know there was a conversation that took place 10 years ago between these people, and I know it was said, but I don't know the exact words.